So here we are on a Tuesday afternoon. It's tiny Rishi Sunak. Hey, what have you been up to, Rishi Sunak? Hiding from who? Well, basically everyone then. Why? And? So, what have you been doing then? Oh, Nick Robinson. I bet he gave you some softball questions. In Rishi Sunak's first media interview since coming out of the cave he's been living on the Yorkshire moors, he met Nick Robinson for some in-depth reporting. Nick's famous for giving Tory politicians an easy ride, but Sunak's ride was much like a car going over a load of boulders in a meteor storm. Yeah, that's probably enough.
I want you to look at this photograph. The President of the United States, the Chancellor of Germany, the President of France, and...
my Auntie Gloria on Blackpool Beach, enjoying a donkey ride?
For the United Kingdom.
Go on, it's Auntie Gloria, isn't it? And Uncle Cedric's wearing a hat.
Your predecessor, David Cameron, the Foreign Secretary.
Ah, must have been some other photo album then. Carry on.
How do you feel when you look at that photo of D-Day at Omaha Beach?
Now, Bet Nation had some odds on this, and pretty far down the list was sexually charged.
Well, the last thing that I wanted to do was cause anyone any hurt or offence or upset.
But you're a Conservative Prime Minister. That's what they do.
Which is why I apologised unreservedly for the mistake that I made. And I can only ask that I hope people can find it within their hearts to forgive me.
There we go, find it in your hearts to forgive me. A phrase which comes up several times in this conversation, so much so that we've got a special klaxon.
And also look at my actions as Prime Minister to increase investment in our armed forces, to support our armed forces.
And to a certain extent, he has a point. Up until 2010, soldiers were required to buy some of their own kit when they were going out on manoeuvres or patrols. However, a common misconception is that British soldiers get food and accommodation gratis due to the appallingly low wages that are actually paid within the services. In actuality, the only time this is actually free is when a soldier is operationally deployed or out on exercise. Now, uniforms are usually supplied free of charge to non-commissioned other ranks, but officers are usually required to pay for theirs. Regulations used to say that other ranks do not have to pay for any item of uniform, unless they lose it, but they'll be pressured into buying things such as mess dress and regimental stable belts. It's worth noting as well that the Conservatives' commitment to protecting the country included ordering 2 aircraft carriers and forgetting to order any actual planes to go on them. When this relatively schoolboy error was discovered, they looked at the cost of aircraft and decided they cost too much. The aircraft carrier cost £9 billion.
But also to ensure that veterans have a minister sitting around the cabinet table with unprecedented support to make this
Johnny Mercer,
the best country
the
in the
MP
world.
and Minister for Veterans, who said more should be done for veterans after hearing of an ex-comrade's struggle. Speaking on the BBC, Veterans Affairs Minister Johnny Mercer spoke after hearing how Paul Barnsley of Colchester considered suicide after leaving the army. But Mr Mercer said he joined the government to ease the transition for veterans into returning to civilian life. He described his former comrade's struggle as heartbreaking. It's really hard to leave the military and go back to civilian life, he told the BBC. And this is very true, but Johnny Mercer and his colleagues haven't made it any easier. The combative ex-army captain is facing the prospect of court sanctions for refusing to name military informants who told him of allegations that Britain's cherished SAS, the elite special forces unit of the British Army, may have unlawfully killed men and children in Afghanistan. Such claims are being aired by a serving government minister who describes himself as the nation's #1 defender of troops. At a public inquiry, it's extraordinary in its own right, so Mercer's concerns about what he describes as cover-ups and a failure of the British establishment to properly investigate wrongdoing. However, it's not all green roses. He has also come under fire for suggesting that veteran charities overstate the scale of PTSD to make more cash. Mr Mercer accused some organisations of going way too far in presenting soldiers as mad, bad and dangerous. He also argued veterans should not blame employment rejections or scrapes with the law on their service, saying it was disingenuous to those who genuinely have problems. But the comments have earned a stinging rebuke from Military Cross recipient Trevor Coult, who serves as a trustee of the veterans charity Veterans in Action. The ex-colour sergeant told The Times Johnny Mercer is in a position where he can promote important things and doesn't, tends to promote himself, which is totally wrong, outrageous. Let's just judge a man by his actions rather than the well-cushioned post he occupies. In truth, the Conservative government since 2010 have made it very difficult for veterans leaving the services, particularly those who suffered physical injuries or mental problems during the course of their service. The DWP don't discriminate between civilians who face significant challenges and ex-military staff, meaning the performative cruelty that is dished out on the unemployed, the sick and the disabled is also fairly targeted at former soldiers who fought for their country.
Do you understand that for quite a lot of people watching, I think, they simply think that the basic duty of the Prime Minister, the duty, was for you to be in that photograph and not David Cameron?
Well, that's why I've apologised unreservedly for the mistake, and I hope people can find it in their hearts to forgive me.
There's that phrase again. He cannot make a sincere apology without referring to a liner card. This is the quality of person that the Conservatives are putting forward as the leader of this country.
My duty is also to make sure that this is a country which looks after our veterans, which is why I'm proud that there is a Veterans Minister sitting around the cabinet table.
Ah, yes, James Heapy. He's the man in charge. He's the guy to go and see. A man full of integrity. Here he is talking about Boris Johnson during the Partygate scandal. And then, after that tirade of what can only be described in polite company as agricultural fertiliser, he's asked, why does Boris get special dispensation? So he knew, but he didn't know, but he was unaware, but he was aware, so he didn't know, but he did know, but he led in there, but he went in there. James Heapy is a man of his word. Unfortunately, the word is bullshit. Let's get back to Rishi's interview.
Nigel Farage has said he thinks you don't understand, you don't care about what he called our culture, what he called our history. He even said that you were not basically patriotic.
Nigel Farage? That smooth-talking, privately educated ex-banker trust fund possessor, troop-in Putin apologist bigot and full-time shit-stirrer? The bloke who led people to believe in a brighter future through Brexit, but neglected to tell them that the brighter future was his, not theirs. Nigel Farage, who goes on the speech circuit in Europe, Australia and America, speaking to far-right groups and spreading his racism and xenophobia for tens of thousands of pounds a pop. That Nigel Farage?
Is he playing with fire by bringing your heritage into this argument?
Well, Nigel Farage can answer what he exactly meant by those comments. I'm not going to get involved in that because I don't think it's good for our country or good for our politics. Now, obviously, I disagree with
that Nigel Farage has destroyed David Cameron's premiership.
Well, to be fair, Farage only did 50% of the work. If David Cameron had put in just a little bit of work in there, you know, the same gusto that he puts into accusing unemployed and sick people of being sat in their arse watching daytime television all day, if he put a tenth of the energy he put into the Remain campaign, we might have had a brighter future and he might still be Prime Minister. But no, he was too comfortable, and let's face it, he's done very well out of office.
He helped bring down Theresa May.
Again, to be fair, Theresa May was hamstrung by the Brexit fraternity in her own party. Had very little to do with Nigel Farage, although Farage was shouting from the background and the media weren't helping in any way whatsoever by amplifying his frankly ridiculous opinions.
And he's now coming for you.
This is quite an interesting part of the interview. Nigel Farage has a habit of going for people who aren't racist, xenophobic or bigoted. He spouts his nonsense and accuses anyone who thinks differently of perhaps being a woke, soft lefty. But here's the thing. He didn't mention Boris Johnson. So what does that say about Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage, eh?
And isn't your problem that many Conservatives think he's more of a Conservative than you are?
Well, at the end of the day, on July 5th, there is only going to be one person that's Prime Minister.
But I'm asking about Nigel Farage.
Well, and I'm answering a question. So the choice for everybody, there's only going to be one of two people who's Prime Minister, Keir Starmer or myself. A vote for anyone who's not a Conservative candidate is just make it more likely that Keir Starmer is that person. So if you are someone, you say, what makes a Conservative?
Bitterness, frustration, stupidity, being attacked by a large donkey when you're a child? I don't know, Rishi, tell me, what does make a Conservative?
If you're someone who wants lower taxes, if you want your pension protected, if you want migration reduced, if you want a sensible approach to net zero that prioritises our security and reducing people's bills, that's what I will offer you.
See, increasingly Rishi Sunak is like one of those Kirby vacuum cleaner salesmen. They come around with the vacuum cleaner and the big pile of dirt, they empty the dirt on the carpet and they go to show you how good that cleaner is, but unfortunately the cleaner doesn't work.
So you won't talk about Nigel Farage at all. You see, a lot of people looking at him and you, they think, these Conservatives, that he's a kind of Sunday roast with all the trimmings.
Yeah, steady on, Nick. Nobody's talking about eating Nigel Farage, just not voting for him.
And you're a quinoa salad.
But you're asking me about personalities.
I'm asking you about Nigel Farage, and people are noting you don't want to talk about him. So let's talk about policy.
Nick, it's not that I'm not willing. I'm willing to talk about everything here.
Except anything that you actually ask me. Everything else I'll talk about. But if you ask me a question, I'm sorry, I'm afraid I can't answer that.
But the simple issue here is a vote for anyone else, including Nigel Farage's party, and I would make the same point about anyone's party, right, is ultimately a vote that makes it more likely that Keir Starmer is in power.
I mean, that's as maybe. The two parties at the moment, the Conservatives are like a family who've been to the beach in the car, but they're locked in the car, the tyres can't get any grip on the sand, the tide's coming in and their feet are starting to get wet. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer's policy positions are revolving around like a gyroscope that defies the laws of perpetual motion. And Keir Starmer has lost a lot of support in key demographic areas with his positions on Gaza, Israel, his green policies. And wait until you find out what his proposals on welfare are.
You promised when you became Prime Minister to cut NHS waiting lists. Have they gone up or down since you made that pledge?
OK, Rishi, not a difficult question. If you want to phone a friend or consult the audience, you're more than welcome. But remember, that beautiful lounge suite could be yours.
I've been very clear. We have not made as much progress on NHS waiting lists as I would have liked, and they have risen.
They've gone up.
Yeah.
Oh, so close. Bad luck there, Rishi. Let's see what's behind the curtain now, shall we? Yeah, bad luck there, Rishi. Here's your £10. Now piss off back to Southampton.
I promised you'd stop the boats. So far this year, more than 11,000 people have crossed the channel, record high. You've not stopped the boats. Why do you deserve more time to try to do it?
Because from the first time that small boats became a phenomenon...
The first time small boats became a phenomenon? When cavemen learned to fish, you mean?
A few years ago.
Blimey, Southampton's fishing industry needs updating.
We got the numbers down last year by a third. That had never happened before. Everyone, when I got this job, said to me, you won't be able to do anything about this problem. Well, because of our plan, we've got the numbers down by a third last year.
Now they're going back up again. You got a record number this year.
But if we stick to our plan, we will continue to bring them down. Why?
Because Rishi and his friends are going to close their eyes and wish really, really hard.
Because if I'm re-elected as Prime Minister, we will get flights off to Rwanda and establish a deterrent. So very simply, my view that illegal migration is unfair, and the only way to fully solve this problem is for people to know that if they come to our country illegally, they won't be able to stay, and that means we have to have somewhere safe to return them. And if I'm Prime Minister, the flights will go, the deterrent will be built.
But why not wait, Prime Minister? You say the flights will go to Rwanda. You say they'll go in just a few weeks' time. You had the opportunity to prove it. You could have said to everybody, here are the flights, People have gone to Rwanda. Here's the deterrent. The numbers are falling. You didn't. You cut and run. You had the election before. And now we have to take it on trust.
Well, no, because as I said, we got the numbers down by a third last year. That had never happened before.
How many people have gone to Rwanda in the 3 years since you announced that you would do this?
Because it's taken time to get this through Parliament, because we've been frustrated.
I don't understand how we can just let this hang. We have staffing issues in hospitality, care, construction, the health service, retail, distribution, transport, numerous other sectors, mostly caused by government policy. And we keep on hearing this mantra, all them people are young men at working age. Well, why not get them to work? We could have reduced pressure on staffing, we would get the tax contribution from their wages, we would know where they are while their applications are being sorted out. And it's not all young men, there are also women and children on those boats. We can't take everyone, we shouldn't be expected to, but where we can help, we should. It's the human thing to do. And that means actually having legal routes to access the asylum and sanctuary system in the UK. Because at the moment there's nothing. If you go to an embassy, if you go to one of the British consulates, there's nothing there. And you're fleeing oppression, you're fleeing persecution, you're fleeing war. And the very good chance is that your name will be returned to the government, which is actually going to persecute or oppress you, leading to unfortunate consequences. So it's any real wonder these people go on the run. The only way for them to access this country is illegally, and that is via the boats. And the boats are dangerous, but that's an improvement on the previous thing that some refugees were using, but hanging on to planes' landing gear. The situation we have at the moment is like having a tsunami in your building and not being able to escape because the only way out says fire door. Makes no sense. And yes, there would be pressure on services, but that's going to be there anyway, with the government refusing to provide funding. By the way, they also refuse to fund mending potholes, increase the number of tax advisors, or fund the police, but nobody seems to blame that on immigrants. And before anyone says it's all been spent on 4-star hotels, they're not hotels. Once they're used for housing asylum seekers, they lose the definition of hotel. They are no longer a hotel. They are hostels. All the gyms, pools, chef, furniture and other stuff is removed. People are basically sleeping on the floor or in bunks. And everything you would expect in a hotel is not there. It's basically a travel lodge. I'm pretty sure if people went on holiday and stayed in a hotel with no television, no furniture, no Wi-Fi, no staff, a locker and a curfew, and be expected to sleep in the hotel bar with a bunch of strangers, I'm not sure it would get that many stars on TripAdvisor.
Yes, and this election's about the future. And there's a clear choice, Nick. Right? If you believe, like I do, the only way to solve this problem is to have a deterrent, we're the only party that can deliver that.
Personally, I think a bigger deterrent is not having the ability to apply for asylum or sanctuary in the first place. You can't just have all deterrent.
You sound to me like a guy at a pub who borrows 50 quid. And he borrowed it 3 years ago. And he keeps saying, don't worry, I'll pay you back. And then when you confront him in the pub, he says, I'll pay you tomorrow. You wouldn't believe him, would you? You constantly promising what you will do, but what you haven't done so far.
We got the numbers down by a third last year. That had never happened before. Never ever.
But that was mainly due to a lot of bad weather that we had, and the fortuitous fact that it happened to coincide with your announcement of these draconian plans.
The numbers had just gone up and up and up until I became Prime Minister. The numbers were down by a third last year, so people can trust me. We've got a plan.
We keep on hearing this. We keep on hearing, we've got a plan. We've got a plan. Boris Johnson said, I've got a plan for social care. It didn't exist. People have got to turn around and say, well, let's see the plan. Let's work it out. Let's see if we can improve it. Let's get some confidence. Let's get some meat on those bones. But nobody ever says, let's see this plan. Let's see if it works. Let's see if it holds water. Because if you said, let's see this plan, I can almost guarantee the sentence uttered in reply would have 1 or 3 phrases in it. National security, commercially sensitive, I don't have it on me right now, but if you meet me in the pub later, I'll show you a copy, and then not turn up.
You say that you're cutting taxes. You've got a bit of a nerve, haven't you? Under Rishi Sunak, as Chancellor and then Prime Minister, the total tax bill in this country has gone up by £93 billion a year. That's even more than Jeremy Corbyn wants to put on people.
Nick Robinson there, expertly playing the Jeremy Corbyn card. Let's see the Prime Minister wriggle out of this particular moral conundrum.
And as you and I have discussed many times, Nick, what's happened in that period? We were hit by a once-in-a-century pandemic.
The bingo time. Right, I've got pandemic. Now, energy crisis, please.
And then an energy crisis.
Hey, house!
Income tax going up this year. Income tax going up next year. Income tax going up the next year. Year after year after year, You are increasing the income tax.
Nick,
Are people watching this programme, but you come in interviews and say, I'm cutting your tax.
Nick, the facts are very clear.
Yes, they are remarkably clear. You're doing everything to sponge as much money as you can out of people, so sending the police around to hold everyone up by the ankles with a blanket underneath to catch all the coins that fall out their pockets.
And I'm sure your team will be able to provide them for you right now, with all the changes, because there's lots of changes that go on in a system, right now.
Right here, right now, right here, right now, right here.
He does say right now quite a lot, mind.
An average worker is facing the lowest tax rate on their earnings that they have seen in this country for over 50 years.
Now, he uses the term average worker there, but he's not actually talking about the person. He's talking about the income of the average workers. So it's anyone under about £32,000 a year, which I believe is the average wage in this country, although that's a fanciful figure to say the least. If you're on £16,000 a year or around about that mark, you're looking at paying about £632 more in tax. So it's a bit disingenuous and punishes the poor exponentially above those better off.
You're talking about the tax rate, Prime Minister, which is very convenient for you because it's thresholds.
No, it combines. But no, Nick. That combines.
And then you come back.
It combines thresholds and the rate.
Forgive me. For
the
people,
effective tax rate taken together for an average worker today.
Bear in mind the phrase average worker actually means the wage you're paid, not the person who's doing the work.
Combining thresholds and the rate is the lowest it has been in over 50 years.
3.7 million more people will pay income tax for the first time because of your policies. 2.7 million extra people will pay higher rate tax because of your policies. So you are increasing some taxes, income tax in particular, while you're cutting national insurance. So let's turn to the Labour Party. You've got a bit of a nerve, haven't you, having a go at the Labour Party? You've raised our taxes by record amounts, £93 billion. You produce some figures, criticised by the boss of the Treasury, criticised by the chair of the UK Statistics Authority, criticised by the former head of the civil service. And yet you come to this interview and you repeat something that you've said that they all think is misleading.
Because it's right.
Everyone else is wrong, and I am right, said the man who decided to fill a barrage balloon with concrete.
And the choice of this election is clear. We are going to keep cutting people's taxes. You'll see that in our manifesto tomorrow. You've seen it in the announcements that we've already made. Labour Party are going to put people's taxes up. We have been through their policies.
The debate that independent Treasury officials had costed Labour policies. Yes. Independent Treasury officials didn't produce that figure that you keep repeating.
So there are 27 policies, as the letter from the Permanent Secretary...
Did they produce that figure, Prime Minister?
Let me explain.
Oh, this should be good. Go on, explain.
There are 27 different policies that underpin that figure. Of those 27, 21 are produced by independent Treasury officials, available online for people to see. 3 come from other government sources, 2 come from the Labour Party themselves, and 1 comes from an independent investment bank. Every single one of them is available, transparent.
And no guessing what you can see through that transparency. Yes, a big pile of
shit. And you tot them all up, and it amounts to £2,000 worth of tax rises for every working family in our country.
When
and
you
that
say
is the
tot
choice
them all up, what you mean
in
is
our
when
election.
Tory researchers tot them all up, treat 4 years of figures as if it's 1 year, divide it between all the families, which no economist would ever do. You then produce a Conservative press release, and you claim that it's been produced by the Treasury when it hasn't. It's a Conservative figure.
Let's go through it again, Nick.
No,
there are 27. There are 27.
Something else.
Well, no, but you've made a point which isn't right. There are 27 figures, 27 policies. 21 of them are costed by the Treasury. 2 of them are from the Labour Party themselves. 3 from government sources, and 1 from an independent investment bank. You tot them all up, divided by the number of households, and that's how you get £2,094 for every working family in our country. And I don't want to see that happen. And that is what the Labour Party will do. That's what a future Labour government has got in store. By the way,
let's not run out of time, Prime Minister. We've other things to talk about. You've made your point. You think it's valid. I put to you that other people do not think it's valid.
The Prime Minister thinks it's valid, but anyone else with a working cerebral cortex seems to have their doubts.
Many people are forced, even in their 30s, to live at home with mum and dad. They simply can't afford the rent, let alone afford to buy a house. Having your own home has got harder under a Conservative government, hasn't it?
It has got harder, and I want to...
This is a situation Rishi Sunak or anyone of his ilk will never have to face. We could solve the problem tomorrow. We could repossess all the houses which are currently vacant, make sure they're suitable for human habitation, unlike rented accommodation, and then put them on the market. The government could do that quite easily with compulsory purchase order. But the thing is, so many Tory MPs are landlords and directly benefiting from the housing crisis at the moment that they're not about to turn around and cut off one of the money supplies that feeds their somewhat dubious interests.
It works in this country. You can't get a GP appointment. You can't get to dentist. You can't afford somewhere to live. The trains don't run on time. Sewage gets pumped into the rivers and the sea. Why do you deserve another chance?
Well, we haven't got time to go over all the things of the last 14 years. I point out one thing which you failed to mention on your list. Thanks to the Conservative education reforms, our children in this country are not just the best readers in the UK, they're the best readers in the Western world.
Which is odd, considering you closed down most of the libraries. Well, there you have it. That was Rishi Sunak speaking on Monday of this week in an interview with Nick Robinson. Inspiring stuff, I think you'll disagree. This morning, though, he managed to do another faux pas and show himself to be completely out of touch. I'll leave you with this and the thought that maybe our Prime Minister isn't the best person to have his hands on even the door of the cargo bay, let alone the tiller of the ship.
When you are wealthier than the king, what do you do day to day to make sure you're still in touch with the kind of struggles ordinary people face? Have you ever gone without something?
Yeah, I mean, my family emigrated here with very little. And that's how I was raised. I was raised with the values of hard work.
What did you go without as a child?
We went out with lots of things, right? Because my parents wanted to put everything into our education, and that was a priority.
So what sort of things had to be sacrificed?
Lots of things, right?
Can you give me an example of
all
something?
sorts of things. So, like lots of people, there'll be all sorts of things that I would have wanted as a kid that I couldn't have, right? Famously, Sky TV.
Okay.
So that was something that we never had growing up, actually. But it was lots of things. But again, that's my experience is obviously going to be what my experience was, what is more important in my values and how I was raised. And I was raised in a household where hard work was really important. You had to work very hard, and family was important, service to your community was important.
I can't afford clothes, I can't afford my rent, I can't afford heating, I can't afford food, but most of all, I can't afford Sky TV.